Hey Aniki, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm good, Kaya. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How's your day been so far?
Not bad. I'm just been feeling the heat, but other than that, it's been good. How is yours?
Oh yeah, it's been hot just like you, just like you as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let the viewers know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, Aniki.
Well, I don't know where to start. I feel like, the who you are question is ever evolving for me because I find myself to just be ever evolving. But I'm Anikie Mgiba. I'm quite a lot. Um, I'm a I'm a graduate. I'm a teacher. Mostly I am interested in mental health, so around psychological counseling. I've completed my undergrad degree with the University of South Africa. And then went on to complete my honors degree in psychology with the University of Pretoria. From there, I went on to complete my teaching degree with the University of Wits, and I'm actually graduating tomorrow.
Oh,
So
excellent.
that's a little bit about me. I'm pretty much interested in mental health, psychological counseling, and mostly, around disabilities as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, congratulations on your graduation for tomorrow. That's
Thank you
fantastic.
so
Yeah. So when you look back at like before you got into psychological counseling, what was your kind of mindset when you decided that's what you wanted to do going forward?
Honestly, psychology, it found me. I didn't find psychology. I didn't really know the kind of spaces that I wanted to get into right after high school. So, when I got admitted into university, I happened to be admitted for psychological counseling. And at that time, I wasn't really, knowledge about what it is or, what the work would require. So initially, I had applied for teaching, but the spaces for teaching were full. So they admitted me into psychological counseling. But when I got exposed to the course and what it requires and what it entails, that's when my perspective changed. And that's when I started to notice, the gaps here and there in my community, especially, where there's a huge gap around, people not being able to access mental health services or not being aware of them in the first place. So my perspective changed because I wanted to create awareness about, mental health problems, mental health support services that are available within our community and to also be able, to provide a guiding hand, towards people having access to such services.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, when it comes to relationships, counseling psychology can be very helpful because you deal with mental health, and a lot of people within their relationships, it can affect their mental health and it can cause them anxiety. And a lot of people that, help people with counseling, they also have issues that they've been able to overcome in their previous relationships themselves. So, with that being said, what kind of struggles do you say you've had in your previous relationships, and how did you overcome those to get to where you are now?
Sometimes when you go through such struggles, you don't really see, where it is taking you. So, when I look back mostly of the struggles that I've had, I know I'm grateful because if someone comes to me in a counseling session with the same type of problems, I can relate to that. And I found out that experience with such problems is more relatable to the client than, if you're responding from perhaps a book-based kind of response. So some of the struggles that I've heard was infidelity that I've had to deal with. It was insecurity just within from myself. It was just, I think for me, I haven't at the time, I haven't really, mastered what I want in a relationship or really got to know myself as a person who was in a relationship. So I really struggled with a lot of insecurities. I struggled with, communicating my love language, if I may put it like that. So struggling with infidelity has been, one of the biggest, I think, challenges that I faced in a relationship. And when it first happened, I didn't really really know how to deal with it. And I was so anxious. I wanted to make it work, but this person didn't want to make it work anymore. But I'm, really, really want to make it work. I'm willing to look past it, and things like that. And at the time, I didn't see that, what, it is time to call it quits. So I really fought for it. I gave it my all. I went beyond my limits to make the relationship work. But, the person was not interested in that anymore. So letting go and accepting that this person is not in my life anymore, that was the biggest part. But when now someone comes and says, I'm facing such and such, I'm able to relate to that, and I'm able to give a much more, matured and experienced kind of response to that.
Excellent, excellent. Now, infidelity is definitely a big one that can affect people's mental health for sure. And I do want us to talk more about that. But before we do, I want to speak on expectations within relationships in terms of gender roles, like in this day and age, like the gender role thing is not always as it used to be. Like traditionally, someone will lead in the relationship and the other person will choose to follow. But these days, people tend to feel like, oh, they want their own freedom. They want to do their own thing and they don't necessarily want to follow gender roles. And some people feel
Yeah.
like that's a very natural way to be, that there's nothing wrong with gender roles. So with that being said, what is your viewpoint on gender roles within relationships?
I think, when it comes to it all starts with expectations. So it is not healthy to set expectations that you wouldn't meet if they were set for you. So when you have realistic expectations, that's when you can have, a clear way forward as to how the relationship is going to work. And when it comes to gender roles, I think that is dependent per couple. There's no general consensus to it as to this is how you should do it, or this is how you can navigate through that. I think every couple comes together and say, you know what, I'm able to do A, B, and C. Can you do D, E, and F, And going forward, then that's how you would want to structure. It depends on how you want to structure your relationships, how you want to share responsibilities within the relationships. And for me, being quite a traditional person, I've been okay with, being in the big seat, allowing someone else to lead. But with the struggles of, trying to find myself in relationships, still trying to maintain who I am in a relationship, I've learned to redefine that. So I think it is redefined by each experience that, one has in their life. But when it comes to gender role, honestly, for me, it depends on, where do you want your relationship to go? How do you want to share responsibilities? And what does it mean for you if your partner does this? What does it mean for you if you do this for your partner? So it's a shared kind of, relationship. It's a shared responsibility type of communication that needs to be had before anything can go even further.
Excellent, excellent. Now, some people would say, like, all of this, like shared responsibility, it's like limiting their freedom, and they kind of want to look at other kind of ways they can live their life without like being like looked at as you should be responsible for this or you should be responsible for that. So they look at different relationship dynamics and they start to look at things like outside of monogamy, like such as a non-monogamy, even a polygamy and things like that. So like some people feel like it gives them more sense of freedom, a more sense of choice and things like that. So with that being said, what is your viewpoint on monogamy versus non-monogamy in relationships?
With I try a lot to not be a psychology student all the time. So, when it comes to such conversations, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what is happening in your mental health? How does this affect you mentally? How does it benefit you as well? How does it affect you emotionally? How does it benefit you in the same sense? And so when it comes to monogamy and non-monogamy, it is honestly, from my personal view, I am for monogamy. I'm not for non-monogamy for personal reasons. However, I do not then criticize people who decide to, do it otherwise. And so when it comes to that, really, my interest is around, how did you grow up? How was your childhood background? Did you have both parents present? Is there something that happened that changed your perspective? Or is there anything that you experienced directly or indirectly that changed your perspective of, that would have led to now the decisions that you're making when it comes to, such relationships, or when it comes to such forms of relationships? And so really it depends on, when it comes to psychology in general, I feel like there's no one size fits all type of solution to it. And so it will really depend on per person as to how do they feel about it, and what is then the root cause that led them to believe, in monogamy, or that led them to believe in non-monogamy, for instance.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I know you said yourself you're pro monogamy, and a lot of times when people hear that their partner wants to be non-monogamous or open up the relationship, their initial reaction is, okay, that means there's something missing in our relationship. That's why you want to open it up. So do you think there's any truth to that, or do you feel like a relationship can be open without there being something missing in that relationship?
I think there is a bit of truth to it. And mostly that's because, when it comes to such, for a lot of people, when such a concept is introduced, it's because the way they take it is mostly influenced by the fact that it's a new concept to them. So they don't really know how to process it based on previous experiences, for example. So if a partner comes and says they want an open relationship, obviously, there's a part of there's an emotional and psychological part of yourself that will question, am I enough? Am I doing this right? Am I not doing this right? What do I need to work on, or what do I need to improve? And I think especially for on the side of women, the first thing that comes to mind is, am I not enough? And so there's a bit of emotional attachment to it. There's a bit of psychological attachment to it, and a bit of physical attachment to it, because you start to look at yourself in a different manner. You start to want to change parts of yourself just to make sure that your partner is, satisfied with just having you. And so the conversation around open relationships, really, it is quite a tricky one. And I think that's because it is a relatively new concept. So, and especially within the African context, it is a relatively new concept because people are not used to doing it in that way, or people are not familiar with the concept, and they think it is a much more westernized concept than it is of an African concept. And so the discomfort that comes with it is real. The change that comes with it is real as well. And the compromises as well that comes with it, because if your partner says they want an open relationship and they give you an ultimatum, for example, you'd have to choose, do I want to keep this person in my life, or do I choose to let them go so that they can be open in their relationships going forward? So it narrows down to the kind of person that you are. Some people are quite experimental in their nature. They want to experience how they would fit into things, or if there's a new concept that's trending, they'd want to experience or to experiment on that concept. And some people are quite traditional in their personalities. They want to stick to what they know. And so there's no one answer fits all type of response. However, I do believe, it has a great effect, impact on one's psychological well-being, on one's emotional well-being, and physical well-being as well. And if there's any spirituality linked to it, I believe there's also, there's spiritual well-being could be affected as well.
Sure, it definitely does have a spiritual impact on one's spirit doing these type of things. So one should be sure as to like what they want to get involved in before getting involved with it. Would you agree with that?
I definitely, I would echo the same sentiments as well. And because I think with just coming from an African perspective, when you engage in sexual relationships with more than one person, one thing to always remember is that sex is spiritual more than it is physical. And so if you're experiencing different sexual partners, you're in a way you're collecting, the spirits or the energies of these people that you are, interacting with. And that in the end would affect, it would either affect you as the person who's doing it, or it would either affect the partners that you have or the partners that you're doing this with. So from an African perspective, really, it is more spiritual than it is physical, and the effects of it I honestly can manifest in the physical, but the effects of it can also be spiritual as well and affect you in many parts of yourself that you wouldn't have been aware of or you wouldn't have been exposed of should this not have happened in the first place.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, now, like, regardless of if a relationship is monogamous or non-monogamous, jealousy can always arise in a relationship. For example, in a non-monogamous relationship, it could be you are spending more time with this partner than you're spending with me. And in a monogamous example is I notice that you are looking at this person or talking to this person a lot and it makes me feel a certain way. So with that being said, when someone is feeling jealous all the time, like how can their partner that is like being accused of these things let them know that there's nothing to be jealous about? And how can a person that's feeling these jealous emotions start to deal with their emotions of jealousy?
I think with jealousy, the jealous person needs assurance more than anything. They need assurance that they're not overthinking this, that, they're not blowing this out of proportion, things like that. So when it comes to jealousy in a relationship, it is natural, right? A little bit of it is healthy because it shows how much you would care for your partner, and things like that. But too much of it then becomes dangerous because it could propel you to do things that you wouldn't normally do if it wasn't there. And so when it comes to how it affects the partner or how you can reassure your partner that there's nothing to worry about, it honestly starts with communication. And communication is then supported by your actions. If you then as the partner promises, okay, I can see that for the example that you gave, I can see that I am talking to this person more than I am talking to you, or I am spending more time with this person more than I am spending it with you. I have to then, as the partner, you have to then reduce the amount of time that you spend with that person and direct it to your partner. Reduce the amount of communication that you'd have with that person and redirect it to your partner. So it honestly starts with a simple conversation of this is what I'm noticing and this is how it makes me feel. And also in your individual space, think introspect as to if this continues to happen, what are you going to do about it, right? If I have spoken to my partner, but they're not changing or they're not promising to do what they said they would do, what is then the way forward for you to really avoid getting yourself in dangerous situations where you're now stalking someone else, for example, or things like that. But introspect, see how this makes you feel, and ask yourself, what am I going to do about it? And if this persists to happen, then you should have options as to I'm going to go with this option or I'm going to choose, something else. But you should always have options that you can work with should this persist to happen. And if it does not persist to happen, then you would have known that the communication really worked, and then your partner kept up with the promises that he made to make it work. And so it's a conversation between you and your partner, and it's also a conversation with yourself.
Excellent, excellent. Now, communication is definitely important in that kind of a situation. But do you think it can get to a stage where it becomes controlling? Let's say, like the partner that is being accused of these jealous things, they're speaking to people at work, for example, and they need to speak to these people, but their partner is feeling some kind of way. And if they were to make these changes, it would affect their work or like whatever kind of a business that they're doing. Do you feel like that can start to be a controlling thing that has a negative effect, or what's your opinion on that?
It definitely would lead to a negative effect. Remember, a little bit of it is healthy, but too much of it is not. And self-awareness in this instance is quite important. To be aware of yourself, to be aware of what you are capable of doing, to be aware of your traits, to be aware of the kind of personality that you have, to be aware of the kind of person that you are when you're with your partner, to be aware of the kind of person that you are when you are with yourself, right? When you are by yourself. And so too much of it that could spiral out of control can lead to now having a controlling partner who has to then limit how you speak to your colleagues, with the example that you gave, how you speak to your colleagues, how often do you speak to them, how often you should see them. If you're on a phone call with your colleagues, they will start to control in the amount of time that you would spend talking to that colleague over the phone, or the amount of time that you would spend on your phone in general, or even if it's not talking to a colleague or someone else. And so it does build up, and the control, it does not just happen rapidly. It is gradual. It takes time. It takes time, and it builds up and builds up and builds up until the next person can actually see that this person is actually trying to control what I do. It will start as small gestures of, I don't like it when you do that. It builds up to don't do that. It builds up to more of a request now than an ask. Don't do that. And then it builds up again to I told you don't do that, and you continue to do the very same thing you're told not to do. So now it becomes, a type of relationship where you're told what to do, you're told what not to do. But that builds up slowly. So it doesn't just, happen overnight. It builds up slowly. And by the time the next person realizes it, the other person has controlled so many aspects of your life. It's not easy to get out of it. So it can have really negative impact on the relationship itself. It can have a negative impact on the partner that's being controlled. And it also can have a negative impact on the person who is controlling the partner, because the moment they start feeling like they're losing control of that, you never know what a person is capable of.
For sure, for sure, for sure. Now, earlier we were speaking about infidelity, and like when it comes to jealousy, like sometimes there's some truth to it because infidelity has happened. Now, some people, when they've had infidelity in their relationship, they're like, they can never be back with this person. It's over, it's done. And some people feel like, oh, we can communicate about this and we can work it out and move forward. So with that being said, what is your viewpoint on forgiveness after infidelity in a relationship? Do you feel like the relationship can get back to where it was, or do you feel like there's always going to be an issue?
Oh, there will always be an issue. That's just from my personal experience. With infidelity, there's a level of, agony that comes with infidelity that's really hard to let go of. And so in the beginning of the relationships, intentions are important to be outlined and clarified right from the beginning. It is important to know what you're willing to take, what you're willing to compromise, what you're willing to put up through with. And if now that person crosses the line that you're not going to be able to compromise, then you would have spoken about it, and you know how you would react to it. But with infidelity, there's always going to be it's always going to be a stain in a relationship that's just there. It's easy to ignore it as time goes by, but sometimes it always, comes back and reminds you that, I am still here. So mostly, I found that things don't really go back to the way they were. And because you're, worried about what if this happens again, or you're worried about did I make the right decision for giving, the infidelity, or do I want to also make my partner feel the same pain that I felt to when if I commit the same type of act that he also committed in the relationship. And so forgiveness, if you are one to forgive, good for you. But it is important to forgive honestly, just for the benefit of yourself as well. But if you forgive and decide to continue with the relationship, just know that it is going to always be a stain in the relationship that you can't just wash off, with one laundry cycle. It will always be there, and maybe you learn to live with it. Maybe get tired of it, but it really does determine where the relationship goes from, that moment going forward. And it also determines determines, how it really redefines how your relationship should be going forward. Because should this happen again, are you going to walk out, or are you going to forgive again? That's something that you need to, have a conversation with yourself with. That's something that you need to have a conversation with your partner as well. And so it is a bit of both, Kayo, to be honest. You can forgive and move on, but it always lingers at the back of your mind. Or you can just choose to walk away and, but you know, just to be honest, in this world that we live in, it is something that is difficult to run away from. So it will also be, quite beneficial to ask yourself, if I leave this relationship because of the infidelity, am I not going to find it in the next relationship? Or, to have questions like that. And so I don't think there's really any running away from it. It's just about, knowing what you're willing to compromise, or what you're willing to put up through with, and just knowing yourself as a person who exists outside of a relationship, and as a person who exists in a relationship as well. And to know, your limits, to know, from this point going forward, I can go, but from here to there, I don't cross.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so Anikie, it's been great speaking with you. Thank you for everything that you shared, and thank you for like all the input that you've given us. So where could people find you, find out more about you, and find out more about what you do?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. You are doing amazing, amazing work with this podcast. I've been watching, videos, the ones that you have sent me, and I just keep learning every day. So people can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Anikie Mgiba. I'm not a social media person, so I wouldn't say you can find me on social media, but I am on Instagram as Anikie Mgiba as well.
Excellent, excellent. And for the viewers, Anikie is now with us on Mate Coach as well. So you will be able to find her on Mate Coach, and the links to her socials will also be in the description, so you can find out more about her and what she does. So once again, thank you so much, Annika, for coming on. Any final words before you wrap up?
I would say, final words, I would say you're doing a great work. I'll never stop telling you that.
Thank you so much, Anika. And I appreciate everything that you've shared. Once again, it was a very insightful to myself and the audience as well. I believe so. Yes,
Thank you so much, Kayo. Speak again soon.
for sure. You're very welcome.